If you run a business where you make garments for people, it could be bespoke tailoring or ready to wear. Whatever it is, you would need to make profit, unless of course you're running a non-profit making organization. Because no matter how passionate you are about what you're doing or how much you love your job, you would need money. Money for upgrades, money to pay bills, money to sustain your business, money to expand your business, money for upgrades to acquire new knowledge, and also very importantly, money to take care of yourself, because your business should take care of you, take care of your needs and your wants. To be able to achieve all of these, you need to make profits from your business. Making profits begins from how you calculate your pricing. How do you calculate your pricing? Do you just look at a garment and, judging from how the garment looks, you assume a price in your mind? If you have been doing that, you need to stop, because chances are that you are either overpricing your product or underpricing it. Now, the danger of underpricing your product is obvious. Of course, you wouldn't make any profits, not so, or you'll make very little profits. Overpricing is also dangerous for your business, because chances are that your customers are going to find that product somewhere else at a cheaper rate, and they're going to find out that you've been overcharging them, and then you lose your customers. To help us calculate our pricing today, I'm going to be showing you a method I use to calculate my pricing, and I've used this method for years and it has worked for me. So in order to help us determine how to price a garment, I'm going to be using the garment I'm going to be putting in this video somewhere at the corner as an example of the garment you're going to be costing. So let's assume we are costing this dress. This is what we're going to be doing. The first thing on our list is the cost of materials. Okay, so when you talk about cost of materials, you're talking about your thread, your lining, your interfacing, your zipper, and if you are buying the fabric for the client, you'll be considering the cost of the fabric. So I have all of that listed down here. Please take note that even if you have any of these items in your shop already, let's say you have thread, you have the matching color of thread, you have the matching lining, you have interfacing, you have zip, please, you still want to write it out. Write the current price of the amount of these things you need in the market. Write the current prices down and add it up. This is going to add to your price, the price of the garment. Next thing on our list is the charge, the cost of labor. Okay, so we have labor charge here. So for labor charge, you would want to ask yourself, how much is my services worth in a day? So let's take, for example, your day of work is a 6 or 7 hour day of work. So for 7 hours of work in a day, how much am I going to be charging? Okay, how much is my time worth? How much is 6 hours of me cutting, sewing, stoning fabric? How much is it worth? You want to determine that. Okay, so let's take, for example, if you live in a country like Nigeria where people are paid per day and manual workers are paid per day, or we're going to be assuming that a worker is paid 4,000, or you charge 4,000 per day for a day of 6 or 7 hours, you charge 4,000 per day for your services. Or if you live in a country where people are paid a minimum wage and they have a minimum hourly wage, you could use the minimum hourly wage as your rate per hour. Okay, so you want to determine how many hours is it going to take me to finish up this garment. Okay, so if, for example, it takes you 6 hours, your work day is 6 hours a day or 7 hours a day, and it takes you 7 hours a day, 7 hours in that day to finish up this garment in question, or this dress, this particular design in question, which we're using as an example, you would want to multiply the hourly rate. This is the hourly rate here I've written here. I have 11.44 pounds, which is the minimum hourly rate for the UK. Which people, this is the least somebody can get paid for labor. Do you understand? So this is the least somebody can get paid for labor. I'm not saying this should be your rate. It could be more than this, it could be less, but I'm just using this as a yardstick. Of course, your rate, the rate you charge for labor, should not be lower than the minimum wage for the region where you live in. So please take note of this and put it into consideration when calculating your labor charge. Okay, so for this dress, I'm going to be assuming that I charge 4,000 naira a day for labor. Okay, and this dress is going to take me 1 day to finish, to start and complete. Okay, so it means my labor for this dress is 4,000 naira. So I'm going to be using 4,000 naira as my labor charge for this particular dress. Next thing I have on my list is the overhead cost. So when I talk about overhead cost, I'm talking about your electricity bills, or if you live in a country where you need an alternative means of electricity, like Nigeria, where we have to use generators to get power supply. When the source of electricity goes off, then you would also want to add your cost of fuel to this bill. Okay, so under overhead cost, you also have rent. So the two things we have under overhead cost is your electricity bill and then your rent. So for the electricity bill, you would want to add all your sources of electricity, like I said earlier, for the month. So you want to determine how much you are being charged for electricity bill in the month. How much do you spend on your generator in the month? for fuel. On fuel, that's how much you spend on fuel. You want to add all of that together. Calculate how much you spend. You should know after some months of working in your shop, you should be able to know how much do I spend on electricity bill in a month, how much do I spend buying fuel for my generator. Then you want to add this up together, and then you have the amount you spend on electricity in the month. So what you want to do is you would want to take this amount. Let's take, for example, you spend 100,000 naira on electricity bill per month. You want to divide it by the number of days you work in a month. Let's say you work for 25 days in a month, and you divide 100,000 naira by 25 days. That means you spend 4,000 naira a day on electricity. So this is your cost for electricity in a day, 4,000 naira. So if that dress, like we determined earlier, takes you 1 day to complete, it means that you would have spent 4,000 naira on that dress. Okay, you would have spent 4,000 naira on electricity for that dress. Okay, and in this case we are going to be assuming that it's just that dress you made in a day. So if you make other dresses in a day, it doesn't matter. Just assume that your cost for electricity for that day is 4,000 naira. So the cost of electricity for this dress is 4,000 naira. So we have that out of the way. So let's take, for example, that your cost of rent for the month is 50,000 naira. Let's say you spend 50,000 naira in a month for rent. Okay, so what you want to do is you take that's 50,000 naira, divide it by the number of days in the month, or you divide it by the number of days you work in your shop in a month. So we're just using 30. Let's use 30 here. I use 30. Okay, let's say, for example, it's 30. So you divide 50,000 by 30, and this gives us 1,700. Note that all these figures are just for illustration purposes. So when you are doing your own, you use your own figures. You use how many days you spend in your shop in the month, or how many days you work on your premises in a month. Say, for example, you spend 1,700 per day on rent. Okay, so this is your cost of rent per day. As we determined earlier, we're going to be using 1 day to complete that dress. So this means that it's going to, the cost of rent for that dress for that day is 1,700 naira. So that's our cost of rent. So we're just going to take our cost of we'll take our cost of electricity, which is 4,000 naira per day, plus our cost of rent 1,700, and that will give us 5,700 naira. So this is our overhead cost. Next thing we have on our list is miscellaneous. So miscellaneous is just basically to cover those costs which you might forget. Okay, so sometimes when you're calculating your pricing, you put a certain price. For example, for, let's say you think thread, the last time you went to the market you thought thread was 150 naira, only to go to actually buy it and you discover it's 200 naira. So this miscellaneous expenditure is going to help to cover all those costs that you did not expect, okay, to happen, all those price increases. This is why we are going to be adding miscellaneous to our price. So for miscellaneous, I use 10% of the material cost. So I take the total cost of materials, which we calculated earlier to be 11,150 naira. So 10% of that is 1,115. Next on our list here is the salary. So at this point, I know you're wondering, but we just calculated labor. Is labor not also salary? Please guys, your labor and your salary is not the same thing. You should also add your salary to your pricing. And the reason is, sometimes when you have a shop and you have people working for you, you have tailors working under you, when you charge for labor, it means that the labor goes to your workers, the cost of labor goes to your workers. So what happens to you? Does it mean you're not going to make anything on that garment? No. So you need to also add salary. So it's important to pay yourself. Apart from the labor cost, you need to also pay yourself a salary. So salary, to determine what your salary is, I use 50% of the labor cost. So the labor cost, when we calculated it, we determined 4,000 naira as the labor cost. So 50% or half of the labor cost is 2,000. So this is your salary. Your salary is 2,000 from this garment. Next thing you want to consider is the cost of wear and tear. So to determine the cost of wear and tear, you want to get the total cost of equipment used in producing this particular garment, okay, or the equipment you're going to be using to make this particular garment. Okay, so let's take, for example, you have your sewing machine and you're going to be using your generator. Let's take, for example, these are the two equipment you're going to be using to produce this garment. So what you want to do is you want to determine how long does a sewing machine last on the average before it gets damaged. Let's take, for example, a sewing machine stays for 5 years and a generator stays for 2 years before you will need to buy another one or replace it. Okay, this is just an example. Okay, so we have sewing machine, we have generator. Note that you will need more than this to produce a garment, but just to keep it simple, you need your pressing iron. So let's say, for example, you use pressing iron, use a stoning machine, use all these other equipment to produce your garment. you want to add all of this and determine the cost of wear and tear for each of them. So to determine the cost of wear and tear for first of all our generator, we are going to multiply. Let's take for example we have 365 days in a year, so multiply it by 5 because we are assuming that our sewing machine lasts for 5 years. So I'll multiply 365 by 5, and what that gives me is 1825 days. So I'll now take the cost. How much did that sewing machine cost me? Let's say it cost me 200,000 naira. So I'll divide 200,000 naira by the number of days it is expected to last. That means the cost of that machine each day for each day of its lifespan is 110. Okay, so this is the cost of wear and tear for this particular machine. Okay, so next we'll also take the generator. Let's say the generator is going to last for 2 years, and 2 years times 365 days is 730 days. So that's the number of days the generator is expected to last, and the price of the generator was 150,000 naira. So I'll divide 150,000 naira by 730 days, and this gives me 205 naira. So this is the cost of wear and tear of my generator. This is the assumed cost. Okay, so I'm going to add these two figures, assuming these are the two equipment I'll be using to produce my garments. So I'll be adding these two costs together. Okay, so if for example I'm going to be making that dress for 2 days, I'll take this cost of wear and tear for my sewing machine, multiply it by 2, and I'll take this cost of wear and tear for my generator and multiply it by 2. Okay, but in this case we assume that I'm using just 1 day to make the garment, so I'll just be multiplying by 1, and it remains 110, and this remains 205. So I'll just add the two together, and this gives me 315 naira. So this is my cost of wear and tear. Cost of maintenance. So cost of maintenance is how much it will cost me in a month or per day to maintain the equipment I use for my work. So like we assumed, we are using just the sewing machine and our generator for this project. The cost of servicing or maintaining my sewing machine per month is assumed to be 1,000 naira. Okay, so I'm going to be dividing this by the number of days I expect to work with my sewing machine in a month, and this is 25 days. So I'm dividing 1,000 by 25, and this will give me 14 naira. So this is the assumed maintenance cost of my sewing machine per day, and as I have determined already, I'm going to be making that dress for just a day. It's not going to exceed a day, so this is the cost per day. So for the generator, I'll be using 1,500 as cost of maintenance per month, and I'm dividing this by the number of days I will be working with the generator in a month, and this is 25. So 1,500 divided by 25 gives me 60. So I'm just going to be adding the cost of maintenance for the two equipment I assume I'm going to be using for this project, and that is 40 naira plus 60 naira, and this is 100 naira. Okay, so this is my cost of maintenance. So now I'm going to be adding together all my entire cost of production. So I'm adding material costs. This is the cost of materials, cost of labor, overhead costs, miscellaneous, salary, wear and tear cost, maintenance cost. So I added everything together, and it gave me 24,340 naira. Okay, so this is my cost of production. If you live in Nigeria, for example, where different local government authorities come to collect their different levies in a month, then you would be able to determine how much tax you are remitting per month. So you want to take that and divide it by the number of days you work in the month. Okay, now so let's take for example that the tax which you remit in a month is 1,000 naira, divided by the number of days. Let's say 25 days. So 1,000 divided by 25 gives us 40 naira. So you are charged 40 naira tax per day. So this is your tax per day. This is your tax rate per day. So now to calculate your profit, because that is why we are here at the end of the day, to make profit, isn't that? So to calculate your profit, usually your profit margin should be between 10% to 20% of your production cost. Okay, and this is why we had to determine the production cost before we continue. We are not done. We have to determine the production cost first, because we're going to be needing that figure. Okay, so normally the average production and the average profit margin should be 10%. Like this is okay, this is average. And then if it's up to 20%, then that means your profit margin is really high. Okay, so 10% is fine. You can make it, you can raise it up a little, maybe say 15, but 10% is just fine. So for this illustration, I'm going to be using 10%. You can use whatever you want depending on what type of garments you're making and how you're selling them. Are you selling them as retail, as wholesale? This is going to determine how much profit margin you're going to place on your garments. So let's take for example the profit margin we are using is 10%. So 10% of our total production cost, that is 24,340, is 2,434. So this is our profit. Now finally, to the reason why we are here today, to determine the price of our garments. So to determine the final price of our garments, you're going to take the cost of production plus tax plus profit. So we determine the cost of production to be 24,340. Our tax as 40 naira per day, because we determined that we'll just need 1 day to complete that garment. So we're just using tax of a day. If it's more than a day, let's say it's 2 days, then you will use the tax rate per day, you multiply it by 2, and as the case may be. And then you add profit. So this is our profit, 2,434. And then our final price for the garment is 26,814, and this is our price.